Is it the edge or is it the flat? Which do you use when you get in a spat? The attack's coming in and you need to parry, but if you know your techniques, you won't have to worry. Oh hey friends, Lauren back with you, and today we're going to talk about parrying with blades. Now if we were talking about a staff or pole weapons or things and we're using the half, we're not so fussy about how we parry. But when we're talking about blades, and I will use these two knives as an example, do we use the edge or the flat? And I will tell you right now that the flat is going to slip. Flat upon flat, there's no bite. And when you're parrying, whether you're trying to beat the opposing blade aside or just bind, binding is better, you want to make control, you want control of the opposing blade. You want your edge to bite in. So edge on flat, that's okay. Usually you roll from the edge, you meet edge on edge and roll onto the flat. That happens. But I am pushing and I am not skidding. I have bit into the sword. Now, keep in mind, I am blocking the opposing blade with the strong of the big knife. And this is a Cutco brand knife made of some pretty good material. So it doesn't really pick up a lot of damage. Also, it's only really sharp up here. I don't have it very sharp down there. But even still, this knife that isn't such good quality, it's taking a lot of edge damage. I know. So we say, well, why would you parry with the edge if it's just going to get damaged? Well, the first thing is, you matter more than the sword. Okay? I may really like this sword, and the edge may get chewed up in a fight, even though this is just a blunt trainer sword. But guess what? I don't want to get hit. And that's rule number one. Don't get hit. Don't get hurt. Don't die. Do not die in a fight. And we often forget that. We put more importance on the sword than we do ourselves. And I think that's a modern thing. We're spending money on a sword. It's not something that we use every day. We want to take care of it. It's precious. And so we've come up with this thing that, oh, you don't parry with the edge because you don't want to damage your sword. Well, in a medieval context, this sword has two edges. You can simply flip it around and use the opposite edge. And much of the small damage that would happen to the blade can be filed and honed out. And even if there are nicks and little chips and dents and things in that blade, it's still going to hurt if you hit someone with it. So your goal really is to parry and not get hit, okay? And then hit the opponent. And of course, you have a point, you can thrust with many swords, and especially if we're looking at 14th, 15th, 16th century, there's a lot of designs for thrusting, and that's what you're going to use. So you're going to parry, you're going to block, you're going to beat, you're going to do the things to get into the bind or knock the opponent's sword offline, and it doesn't really matter what happens to the sword so long as you're protecting yourself. Okay, also, when I am parrying an incoming attack, I want to get strong on weak. So I want this part of my blade to intercept the opposing blade. So I want to get strong on weak. This is going to give me control. Remember from previous videos, the strong, the part closest to your hand, gives you lots of control. The weak, the part closest to the point, you have less control. So I want to get the strong of my blade onto the weak of the opposing blade, and then I can control. Sure, I can do edge on edge and then roll onto the flat to manipulate that sword. That would be good, okay? But initially, a lot of the time, I'm doing a cutting motion into the opposing blade. If I'm cutting into it, I need the edge. I'm not going to use the air resistance. It's going to be bad. And also, if I block with the flat, the sword is going to bend. Even the heaviest, stiffest blades, if we were to film it in slow motion, we know there's vibration. We know there's going to be some bend. So if we look at the plane of the design, the flat versus the edge, well, there's one direction it's going to move, and one direction it's not going to move. So pairing with the edge means that we are going to have a stiffer block. We're going to get that opposing sword to hit. We're going to be able to control it a lot better. So that's why we want to take this idea of, oh, well, you don't want to damage your edge, so you only parry with the flat. Throw that out. There are times when we can roll onto the flat. There are times when we might get the flat of the strong involved. Sure, okay? I'm not going to say you exclusively parry, block, beat with the edge, but you get more power. If I'm hitting with the flat, I'm losing some of that energy because it is moving the sword. If I am using just the edge, then I'm getting a lot more control. I'm delivering more power. I'm not losing any of that energy by moving my own sword. I just want to control the opposing blade. Okay? Now, remember, if I'm parrying with the strong, that's my ideal. I'm not messing up my edge. I'm not worried about it. That's okay. So if there are little nicks and dings, some of them can be filed out anyway. So with maintenance and care, my sword will be fine. So I may put a lot of, this is my precious sword. Oh, I don't want to damage it. Well, but it is a tool. And what's worse? Damaging the sword or taking the sword in the head? I'd rather not take the opposing sword to the head. I will gladly sacrifice the sword in hand to protect the head on shoulders. Okay? So, do we use the edge in parrying? Yes. If you're making a push-pull, whether it's two-handed or just snapping, you're making a cutting motion into the opposing blade. We are using our edge because it's going to give us better control. We have the direction so that it's not bending. We are not losing that energy transfer to feeding back on ourselves. And yeah, there are times when we'll turn to get the edge on, to get the flat onto the opposing edge, or we want our edge onto the opposing flat. There are definitely situations where the flat will be helpful for us, especially if we've got the strong part where it's not going to flex so much. But remember, from our example, take our two knives. Flat on flat, very slippy. Edge on flat, it makes a sound we don't like, but it does move a bit. Edge on edge, it bites in, especially if you have a better quality sword and an inferior quality sword, or knives as the case may be. This really good Cutco knife is chewing up the blade. But can I fix these little dings if I have a file? I don't know if you can see them. Yeah, there we go. We can kind of see all those little marks. I've been doing a lot of practice with this. I can cut in with the strong. I've got a bind. I'm pushing. I better push away from me just in case because we want to be safe. But look, I'm not going anywhere. I have very little or no movement because those edges allow us to bind. And in a sword fight, control matters. You want to control the opposing blade. You want to make the decision as to what your opponent's blade is going to do. Otherwise, your opponent's going to hit you. So you want to bind, strong on weak. You want to set the opposing sword, other kind of blade aside, and then counter. This is your goal. You don't want to let the opponent hit you. So who cares what happens to the sword? You've got two edges. Damage one edge, flip it around, use the other edge. That's fine. But you matter most. So do you parry with the edge? Absolutely you do. And this whole video came about, one, because Eric asked for it, so I've been thinking about it, and we've been doing some intro classes, and running them. Remember, you're making a cutting motion and using the edge to hit into the opposing sword in order to block the incoming attack. It's just a natural motion. It's what works best. So you have to use the edge. If you're trying to parry with the flat, it's not as smooth as if you're trying to use the edge. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into it. So will I say most of your parrying, your blocking, your beating is going to use the edge by default. If we look at physics, that's just natural. If we look at metallurgy, we know that the sword is going to deliver better energy on the edge than it does on the flat. It's just it's the physics of it. It's the science of it. I can't change the science of it. So anytime someone says, oh, you never parry with the edge, throw that out. Yes, you do, because that's the motion. Your sword is a replaceable item. Your arm is not a replaceable item. So who cares what happens to the sword? Win the fight, fix the sword later. Lose the fight, you could be dead. So do what you can and what works best. Use the edge. Parry with the edge. So, for Eric and for everyone else out there, thank you very much. Suggestions are always appreciated. Do remember, like the videos, subscribe to the channel. That helps the algorithm. That helps spread the message. That gets everything out there. And then we can learn more things like this. And, the more and more I repeat teaching intro classes, the more little things come up that just fit in with your suggestions, and the timings are great. And then I say, hey, that'll make for a good video. It's educational, talks about sword fighting, which is my passion, and educates and entertains all of you. So thanks very much, friends. I hope you enjoyed. Do take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon for more knife and sword swinging action.